now what could I say? I was thinking about what I might say, and I said, what would you say if you were in my position as executive editor of a series? If a filmmaker came to you and said, I have this story to tell you. I have a story about a United States senator's allergies that led to the creation of an office inside the NIH that would be the first official study by the government of alternative medicine. I would say that's pretty interesting. And then if the producer told me that the reaction inside that office was words like, this is sorcery, this is alchemy, this is voodoo, this is witchcraft. And if you said to me that this was the reaction of some of the scientists within that community to the efforts by the politicians to establish this office, as one said, to set up an office of the study of deviltry in the Catholic Church, I would say, you have a great story to tell. And so we at Frontline said, yes, tell me more. And so I'm delighted to take this opportunity to introduce Rainey Aronson, who brought that story to Frontline. Rainey is someone who has worked on a number of award-winning series at ABC News, including a program many of you may have seen called Hopkins 24/7. And she also worked as the coordinating producer on an ABC primetime series called Boston 24/7. She began at Frontline with producing 2 segments for our sister program, Frontline World, and this is her first documentary for the Frontline series. And so tonight it gives me great pleasure to introduce the producer, the director, and the writer of The Alternative Fix, Rainey Aronson.
Okay, thanks, Lou. Good evening. I'm happy to be here tonight to share with you a preview of The Alternative Fix. What you'll see is certainly not the full program. It's 20 minutes of a 52-minute program, so take that into account when you're watching. I'm often asked why I decided to explore the topic, and while I found Senator Harkin's story very interesting in a way to capture their attention, what I felt was really interesting was when I was a producer on the Hopkins 24/7 series, I was privy to many of the private conversations going on between patients and doctors. And what I began to notice was that many of the patients were talking to their doctors about alternative medicine. And while I found that somewhat surprising, what I thought was even more surprising was how the doctors were treating their patients. They were open, they were communicative, they asked questions back, and then sometimes they even gave their nod of approval to these alternative treatments. So this prompted me to think about, well, what's really happening in our country? Is this happening in other hospitals around the country? And I found out that indeed it is. So tonight what you're going to see here is a film that looks at the mainstreaming of alternative medicine and different issues that we attempted to address in the film. I hope you enjoy it.
Each year, Americans spend $48 billion on alternative medicine. More than a third of that on herbs, vitamins, and other potions claiming to treat a variety of ills.
I feel better than I've ever felt. So obviously something's working.
But as alternative treatments become a mainstream industry, some are beginning to ask whether this is good medicine.
The notion of doing no harm has to trump the notion of try it, you may like it.
Or just good business.
What's driving this, of course, is what drives everything, and that's money.
On this winter afternoon at New York City's Beth Israel Medical Center, a group of hospital staff is confronted by a difficult new case. A 12-year-old girl suffering from debilitating nausea and fatigue.
And then Mom said on December 30th of last year, she basically woke up vomiting. And
at first glance, this may seem like a typical doctor's meeting.
She was tested for mono, obviously, I'm sure, repeatedly, because...
I'm sure she
But in this group, in addition to the young medical fellow and her supervising doctor, there is also a mind-body specialist and an acupuncturist.
I would work with that, and I'd actually be more aggressive with herbs and things that will actually help the digestion, so then she can eat more and be interested in other foods.
They all talk on an equal basis about the best way to proceed with this patient's care.
What is her experience of her whole condition? Because anytime you formulate treatment, you want to know where the person is and how they want to address it.
For decades, most Western doctors ridiculed alternative medicine, condemning everything from acupuncture to aromatherapy.
Kind of from a traditional system you look at.
But now, many of them work alongside the very therapies they used to shun, and their hospitals are in the business of selling them.
This is the advancing edge of healthcare. You can either lead or you can follow.
Welcome to the new frontier of alternative medicine,
Feel cool or warm breeze.
where therapies long considered voodoo remedies are now being integrated into our country's finest hospitals. Ted Kapchuk teaches at Harvard Medical School and has written extensively about the relationship between mainstream healthcare and alternative medicine.
Until very recently, alternate medicine would be best characterized as antagonistic medicine. It was a war between the outs and the people who ran the elite institutions in our country. What's happened in the last 10, 15 years is that the strategy of war has ceased.
And that ceasefire has meant that many of our nation's finest hospitals have opened the door to alternative medicine.
The Continuum Center for Health and Healing, this is Paul. How can I help you?
At Beth Israel Medical Center in New York City, their Continuum Center for Health and Healing offers a wide range of these therapies.
Chiropractic, acupuncture, they do mind-body work, Reiki healing.
It was founded 3 years ago under the leadership of Matt Fink, who was the president of Beth Israel at the time.
If hospitals don't get involved in these kinds of programs, they will lose patients because patients will go elsewhere. At the same time, it gives hospitals and other practitioners an opportunity, I think, to be in the advancing edge of healthcare.
And breath out.
New York's Beth Israel Medical Center is on the vanguard of a new trend in medical care. Over a fifth of our nation's hospitals now offer some type of alternative therapy.
This is the cart before the horse. This is upside down. This is Alice in Wonderland. You do the evidence first, and then you do the treatment. And that's the problem with this.
Dr. Edward Schultz offers one of the most contentious alternative therapies at Beth Israel, homeopathy. Schultz has a medical degree from Russia and has been practicing homeopathy for over 20 years. Today, Schultz is having a follow-up visit with Adrian Cernelia and her 5-year-old son, Dylan.
Are you okay? Come on, get up.
When Dylan was only 4, a child psychiatrist recommended he be put on both Prozac and Ritalin in order to stabilize his emotions and erratic behavior. His mother decided to try homeopathy instead and says she has already seen the results.
Since the last time we spoke and we gave him the remedy,
yes,
his behavior has been, he's listening better, his behavior has been more controllable, he's not doing the kind of bizarre things that he was doing before.
With experiences like the Cernelias, homeopathy is gaining acceptance in America. The therapy is already used widely throughout Europe, and there have been some studies that have shown it works. But it still remains one of the most controversial alternative therapies.
And then all of a sudden it just stopped.
And we gave him this remedy, what, 10 m or 1 m?
The remedies that homeopaths prescribe are surprising.
The next remedy I gave him was Tarantula hispanica.
That's correct.
For Dylan, it was ground up tarantula, but in a mild form.
Tarantula.
Homeopathic pills are so diluted that even according to homeopaths, virtually none of the original substance remains.
This homeopathic remedy was diluted 10 to minus 400 times. If you think about it, it would mean that I would take a drop of the tincture of tarantula, put it in a volume of water equal to the volume of earth, and it would be more than I gave to this child. He hasn't seen by your
To homeopathy's detractors, this is what makes the therapy scientifically impossible.
You grind up a spider. You bathe the spider parts in water. You dilute the parts so far that there's not one molecule of spider left. You put that water on a pill and you say, swallow it, it's going to make you feel better. There's no way that that potion of water plus inert pill is anything different from a placebo.
We saw each other how many times, I don't remember.
Even Matt Fink, the person who decided to offer homeopathy at Beth Israel Medical Center, says he doesn't know what to make of the treatment.
My personal view of homeopathy is I don't understand how it works, and I'm personally not convinced that it does work. But that doesn't mean that I would prevent a homeopathy practitioner from working here. We're not supposed to go out and just tell people what to do. They're coming to us for help, and we're supposed to respond to their needs and their requests.
Goodbye, Dylan. Would you like to shut the light off?
There's been a shift. And who gets the authority to determine what's done?
More?
It used to be that nothing went on with a patient in the hospital unless the physician said so. Science no longer has the authority that it did. People point to hospitals and say, oh, they're doing it, so therefore it must be something to it. Of course, that's just backwards. They're doing it because they think you want it. And if you don't want it, they're not going to do it. So it's a market out there.
Good morning.
The bottom line is finances. The reason that these departments are going on in the United States' finest hospitals is because without them, they are afraid they'll go broke. It's a market share. And any hospital administrator knows that, and they should be honest about it.
Is it ethical?
Of course it's not ethical.
I think it is always better to be able to give patients a series of options of how to treat something, tell them what the risks and benefits are, and have them participate in deciding how they should be treated. It's not scientific, but a great deal of healthcare is not scientific. There will always be a certain art to the practice of medicine. Part of it is science, and part of it is beyond science.
The issue isn't that complementary, alternative, and integrative medicine has been disproven, but that very little research in the last decade has been done to prove or disprove its efficacy or its cost effectiveness. We have so few studies that have been done to a level of excellence that they can authoritatively and definitively tell us this does work, this doesn't. The games have just begun.
What is the science behind these alternative therapies?
Once the body is harmonically in tune or in balance with itself, it starts to assimilate and integrate medicine better.
With millions of Americans spending billions of dollars on alternative medicine, we wanted to find out what the scientific research has shown. We went back to the NIH to find out what the Office of Alternative Medicine that Senator Harkin set up 10 years ago has learned. The office, it turns out, has been mired in a continuing controversy between the NIH scientists and the politicians. The scientists argued that Congress was more interested in advocating for unproven therapies than subjecting these new treatments to real evaluation. Harkin and his fellow congressmen complained of slow-moving, overly cautious scientists.
The people at NIH just thought they could just bury it. It was new, and it wasn't invented here, and it didn't fit into the narrow kind of research confines that NIH had been used to.
But Harkin was undeterred by critics of the office as he continued to pressure Congress for more money.
He came back the next year and the year after and the year after and kept on them to start expanding and to do more research.
Finally, in 1998, Harkin won a major battle when Congress agreed to turn the small office into a full-fledged research center. With new status and real money, the NIH could no longer ignore alternative medicine. And as a sign that times were changing, the Institute put one of its top research scientists in charge, Dr. Stephen Strauss.
I took this job because it's about the opportunity to prove that there are new things, that we can expand opportunities for health care. But along the way, we have to accept the possibility that some will not be good, some will not be safe, some will not be better than existing therapies. The public is going to have to accept it. People who have vested interests, they're going to have to get over it.
Now, universities around the country vie for newfound grant money from Strauss's office. At the University of Maryland, they have received a grant from the NIH for the largest American study ever on the Chinese therapy acupuncture. They have recruited 570 patients for this study. All of them suffer from osteoarthritis in their knees and have not responded to conventional anti-inflammatory drugs.
All right? Yeah, fine.
Sylvia Ankers has had arthritis for over a decade.
We don't have any health insurance, so I had gone, to a couple of doctors, and they'd give me a shot of silicone or something in the knees, and it would last for a little bit, but then we were back to the pain and hurting to walk and that. So I figured I was ready for trying anything, and I'd heard, acupuncture, it's old, it's got to be good,
Brian Berman is in charge of the acupuncture study.
The research of acupuncture is complex. Now we're beginning to look at what works, what doesn't work, for what types of patients and what types of conditions.
Though millions of Americans use acupuncture and the therapy has been used for thousands of years in China, large-scale scientific studies in this country have only been able to prove acupuncture's effectiveness for two specific ailments: controlling nausea due to chemotherapy and relieving dental pain. And even these small benefits have been questioned by skeptical scientists.
Both of these conditions are subjective. You're reporting that your toothache feels better. You're reporting that you're less nauseated.
Marcia Angel is a senior lecturer at Harvard Medical School and the former executive editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. She has been a persistent critic of the research done on alternative medicine.
You have to ask, how well were these studies controlled? I suspect in most cases acupuncture works through a placebo effect.
Controlling for what scientists refer to as the placebo effect was the task given to Berman's team.
Let's go ahead with the treatment. Okay. All right.
The placebo effect is the phenomenon of a patient feeling better after a treatment, even when the treatment itself has no medicinal effect. For this study, as part of the control, the patients are not allowed to watch the acupuncture needles being inserted, and to ensure the integrity of the study, neither were our cameras. Some of these patients are not receiving acupuncture at all. Instead, they are receiving a fake or sham treatment.
We had people get needles through a guide tube when we were putting in the real acupuncture. And then when we were putting in the sham acupuncture, we had the guide tube slightly on its side so you would feel a sharp edge, and then we would tap, but there was no needle going through.
This is the way Berman is controlling for the placebo effect. If patients who receive only sham acupuncture report feeling better, it would suggest it was simply the placebo effect at work.
We asked the patients, we developed a credibility questionnaire. What did you think that you got? Did you get acupuncture or did you not? And they weren't able to tell the difference.
I believe that I got the real acupuncture. My granddaughter and I like to go shopping once in a while. We have a bus trip from church, and last time we went to the mall, she pushed me around in a wheelchair. We went again the end of May of this year, and I walked the entire mall. So I know that something was working.
I think I got the placebo. My knees hurt. They still hurt.
I debated with my wife, am I getting the real stuff or not? And after a while, I said, I'm going to suspend my judgment on that. It's working. Whatever it is, whether it's a placebo effect or it's actually acupuncture, it's done something for me.
Should we set up next week's appointment?
The results of the study have not been released yet, but Frontline has been told off the record that Berman's team is encouraged by their findings.
Are you? Come right in.
When Berman publishes his acupuncture study, it will only be the second large-scale trial completed on alternative medicine since the NIH began funding the research 10 years ago. In the meantime, before science can offer many answers, patients will continue to use therapies that they believe work for them.
I'm getting results, and I'm feeling well. It would be ridiculous for me to not trust what's happening. Nothing that anybody could say would make me feel differently.
Patients really believe in their own belief system, believe in their own experiences. My mother is a good example. Her religious act of taking all her dietary supplements, her rituals of taking care of herself, which aren't scientific, give her a lot of support, give her a lot of sense of meaning. And those are important parts of her life that are not going to be tampered with by objective science.
For Christy and Gil Gorin, seeing Papa Joe and the Maoris was never about science. It was about hope. 1 year after their session with the Maoris, Christy is still not pregnant, but she's still certain they're on the right path.
If people were to look at this and think, oh, they're just hoping, we both feel like, what else is there? We've taken this into our own hands. We've done what we need to do to make ourselves happy and to feel better, so this is going to work for us. We feel very confident.
Okay, so that's the end of the clip. You'll see the whole thing tomorrow night if you want to watch more. Thank you. It's funny seeing it in this order because it's all out of order. So when you actually watch the film, you'll see the beginning of the patient's story and the end. So it'll be a little bit easier to follow. So tonight we've gathered a number of local experts from the medical field, all with varying opinions on how alternative treatments fit into today's practice medicine. The panelists here tonight are not in our documentary, but rather are experts in their field and are here to answer your questions. So I hope you'll have a lot of them. Each panelist will have a few minutes to give his or her opinion on alternative treatments, which really isn't enough time, but they'll at least get to say something. We will then open the floor to questions and answers. I will do my best to moderate, but certainly if you have specific questions for each one of them, just say their names specifically or ask me to help you with that. We'll have microphone runners in the crowd, and just raise your hand and we'll come to you. So first we have Shiva Barton, Dr. Shiva Barton. Dr. Barton is a naturopathic doctor practicing at Wells Space in Cambridge. Naturopathic physicians are primary care and specialty doctors who address the underlying cause of disease through natural therapies and integrate the healing powers of mind, body, and spirit. Dr. Barton is a graduate of Bastyr University and is the current president of the Massachusetts Society of Naturopathic Doctors and former president of the Massachusetts Acupuncture Society. That's a very hefty bio. He is a frequent lecturer at national conferences on naturopathic treatment protocols. Next is Dr. Jacques Carter. Dr. Carter currently serves as a full-time attending physician at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston and is also on the faculty of Harvard Medical School. He has earned degrees from Howard and George Washington Universities and received his medical degree from Georgetown University. Dr. Carter completed his residency training in internal medicine at the New England Deaconess Hospital in Boston and received his MPH degree from the Harvard School of Public Health. A former director of one of the major clinical clerkships, he now serves as a teacher, advisor, and mentor for Harvard Medical Schools. Thank you. And finally, Dr. Ali Domar. Dr. Domar is a pioneer in the development of mind-body programs for women's health issues and is currently the head of Mind-Body Center for Women's Health at Boston IVF. She has conducted groundbreaking work in infertility, specializing in the relationship between stress and infertility, and creating innovative programs to help women manage stress. Prior to joining Boston IVF, she was the director of the Mind-Body Center for Women's Health, and she's also written 4 books on issues dealing with mind-body stress management issues for women. Thank you so much for joining me. What we'll do now is each one of you will state your positions on alternative medicine, and then we'll open up for questions. Thanks.
Hi, thanks for having me here today. I guess, in brief, I'm for naturopathic. I'm for natural medicine or alternative or complementary medicine, since that's what I do every day, all day. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and for those of you who are not familiar with my profession, we are basically general practitioners for the medical specialists in natural therapies. We graduate from, it's a separate profession from MD. We're called NDs, or nice doctors. And I happen to know these guys have a sense of humor otherwise. It's a Western-based training. Instead of specializing or focusing on surgery and pharmaceuticals, we focus on nutrition, homeopathy, herbal medicine, physical medicine, lifestyle intervention, stress reduction, like that. As I said, it's a Western-based training. It's comparable to conventional medical training in some respects, where we study the same anatomy and physiology, genetics, biochemistry, all that stuff. The difference is we don't do inpatient care. So if you get in a car accident, don't come see me. Come see me after you go to the hospital. We don't do major surgery. So it's strictly outpatient general medicine using natural therapies. The most interesting thing to me about naturopathic medicine is that it's a holistic approach. So rather than just substituting a natural therapy for a conventional therapy, we dig a little deeper and try to see what the underlying cause of the problem is and treat it that way. So my philosophy about medicine in general is it's really important to use the treatment that works the best, that has the fewest side effects. And it really doesn't matter if it's natural medicine or conventional medicine, if it fits that description. With that being said, naturopathic physicians or naturopathic doctors have been using natural medicines. Our profession is over 100 years old, and we've been using natural medicines for all those time. I look pretty good for being over 100, don't I? And we find that those treatments are very successful. So, of course, I'm a fan of natural medicine. As I said, that's what I do every day. To me, I think it's absurd to think that natural treatments could not be helpful to help a person with their health problems. Just as it would be absurd to think that conventional medicine could not be helpful. I think there's a room for many different types of medicine, and once again, I feel the use what works the best, and has the fewest side effects, and gets the job done.
Thank you. Dr. Carter?
Well, I'm a primary care physician, and I take care of a lot of patients who use alternative medicines or complementary medicines. I think that as a doctor in the 21st century, you've got to be familiar with these therapies, because your patients are going to come in, and if you ask them, they'll tell you they're taking them. But if you don't, many won't. I happen to have a set of patients who will tell me what they're taking. And I think that the jury is out for me with alternative medicine. I think that there are a number of preparations that I think may be of some benefit. There are a number of preparations that I strongly feel of no benefit. I don't know how well these products are tested. I don't know how safe many of them are. There are no controls over the quality of some of these products, at least not by the government. I understand that there is a strong resistance to having that done for a lot of reasons, but I think that we have to know about these products because our patients are taking them. Dr. Fink mentioned we have to do treatments for our patients that are safe, and we have to let them know what the benefits and what the risks are. For many alternative medicines, we have no idea what the risks are. And I think that speaks for the fact that we need to study these therapies ad nauseum if it's going to benefit people. The fact that I'm not knocking the placebo effect, I think placebo effect is great if, in fact, that's what you're seeking. But I think if you've got a sick person who, in other words, gets sicker because they're using a product that's not working, then we've got a problem with that kind of care. So the key, I think, is research. Let's see what these products do. I'm not knocking any of them. I think some of them may be beneficial, and I'm all open for putting money into it. I think that money has to be done by the government. I think that no drug company that looks at the profit line will put money into therapies that they can't market and put their name on. So nobody's going to go out and do work on vitamin therapy and things that are in the common domain because they're not going to make any money out of that. This has to be done by the NIH, and I think money should go into the NIH. But I think we need to caution our patients about these products, many of which they think because they buy them over the counter they're safe, when we have no idea. They think when they go into the health food store and they buy a product that's an herbal product that is safe. They think it's safe because it's sold in the store and it wouldn't be on the counter if it were not safe. It's a mistake. We don't know what's in some of those products. The senator talked about the bee pollen. Great. But he said some days he took 60 pills. Well, people do that. They take mega vitamin therapy. They take 100 pills. They think it's safe because they can buy them over the counter. And I think we need to study. We need to figure out what works. I'm all for using things that work, just as this doctor is. But I think we need to study.
Ditto. Thank you. And before we go on, I just wanted to mention that in the film there's a whole section actually on dietary supplements and looking at the regulations or lack thereof on dietary supplements.
Well, I teach mind-body medicine, and I think the difference between mind-body medicine and alternative medicine is that there's nothing that I teach that hasn't been research proven. There's been a randomized controlled prospective study. And I will only see a patient if they're also seeing a regular doctor. And I had the privilege of watching the whole documentary before tonight. And I was sort of having things reinforced in my head. There's one huge danger about, or there are two huge dangers with alternative medicine. The fact is we haven't done research on it yet, so we don't know if it's safe. In fact, there's a recent study that shows that men who take St. John's wort, that may switch on the breast cancer gene in their sperm. So they may be producing girls who are at higher risk for breast cancer. So these things are not necessarily innocuous. But the two big dangers of alternative medicine are, one, the cost. I mean, when you watch the documentary tomorrow night, you'll see a man with pancreatic cancer who comes from Canada down to see a physician in New York, and you see him paying $4,000 in cash. Am I right?
That's about $2,800.
Or $2,800, whatever it is. It was thousands of dollars in cash for a treatment that included having 3 coffee enemas a day. And so the cost of alternative medicine is tremendous. Most insurance companies don't cover it. And so people are spending an enormous amount of money on alternative medicine, which worries me. And the second is that people choose alternative medicine rather than conventional medicine. And they follow this couple with infertility, which is my subspecialty, and they show her the couple going to this New Zealand Maori,
right.
who basically beats up his patients. I mean, they cry because he's manipulating them so roughly. And as you saw from the clip tonight, that couple waited a year to see if that treatment was effective. They didn't get pregnant. I can guarantee you there are a lot of things they could have done in that year which would have radically improved their chances of getting pregnant. And so they lost time. And you see cancer patients and infertility patients following the alternative route rather than the traditional route and suffering because of it.
Thank you so much. So now we'll just open it up to questions, and we hope we can... Okay?
I guess I'll flip this question in two directions. For people like Dr. Carter, the question would be, anecdotally, do you think there are certain therapies that you think will be found effective once NIH has studied them, perhaps not supplements, but perhaps other treatments such as chiropractic or whatever? And then flipping the question around for Dr. Barton and Dr. Domar, do you think there are limits? Specifically, are there things that should not be treated by these kinds of things where conventional medicine is really the better solution? In other words, what's the sphere of influence of alternative medicine And what's the sphere of influence of conventional medicine?
I think that there's benefit to chiropractic. I think that I have patients who see chiropractors with chronic back pain. They get manipulations that are beneficial. I tell my patients to seek chiropractic attention if they've seen all of my guys, the orthopods and the rheumatologists, and they're still having symptoms, and they need treatments. And I've found that many people benefit from chiropractic therapy. I think acupuncture may end up being a type of therapy that works for certain things. This pain that we saw on this clip, I think it may be beneficial. I think that the mistake that one of the people in the clip said was that it was old, so it had to be good, which is not always true. I mean, but I think that acupuncture is probably going to be beneficial. And those are two things that a lot of my patients get. I don't knock that. They come back and they tell me it works. And if a patient comes back with a chronic complaint and comes back and says, I got this therapy and it works, and you don't think that it's going to hurt them, I'm all for it.
Dr. Barton, do you want to try that question?
Sure. The second part of the question is, are there limits? Are there things that you shouldn't treat? And the answer to that is it depends. It depends what the person's done before, what you know the best treatment is. So as an example, I've seen patients with almost every sort of problem, from colds and flus to cancer. And I have to say, I think there's a lot of junk out there in the complementary medicine field, but there's also really a lot of good stuff. And so it depends on what you're doing with that patient. So I think it just varies. There's room to treat almost anything if you are, and not necessarily treat it by yourself, but either in conjunction with the conventional medical treatment, helping the conventional medical treatment work better, reduce the side effects of the treatment. So it really varies.
Well, I think one of the problems is that conventional medicine is not really terrific at treating a lot of chronic illnesses. And, because modern medicine has gone so far, a lot of diseases that might have killed people when we were all younger, people are now living for years and years, and even with metastatic cancers. And so maybe that's the role for some alternative treatments. I mean, I think acupuncture, for the most part, is good. There was one study with infertility that showed it dramatically increased pregnancy rates, but the authors of the study say we don't know if it was because of the acupuncture or because the women believed it was going to help them. And they said you can't make it part of clinical practice until you've tried a sham study. So of course, every infertility patient in the country now wants to do acupuncture. And so what I tell my patients is, other than the cost, it's very unlikely acupuncture is going to harm you. And in all likelihood, if you go for an acupuncture session, you're probably going to feel more relaxed and less anxious. I mean, there's an acupuncturist I spoke with at a conference, and he was saying, at the very least, you're going to lie quietly in a beautiful room listening to great music for an hour a week. How many of us do that? So I think it's very unlikely that acupuncture is going to harm anyone other than the cost of the sessions, and I think there is potential benefit. What really makes me nervous is the herbs and some of the megavitamin therapies.
Thank you. Yes?
Are osteopaths considered practitioners of alternate medicine?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Osteopathy, is that alternative medicine?
No.
What is it?
There are clinicians who put manipulations as part of their therapies, but they're just like MDs. They just train at different kind of medical schools.
They do regular residencies. Mm-hmm. They do residencies just like
MDs. MDs do.
Though some osteopathic physicians do, besides spinal manipulation, some different types of physical therapy techniques which might be considered more complementary medicine.
First of all, I'll say I definitely believe in most of the natural treatments, and I want to specifically ask, from your experience, do you know acupuncture works for hypothyroid? And I know a friend of mine who's going through it.
And you're directing the question to Dr. Barton?
That's correct. I'm sorry.
And the question was if acupuncture
works for hypothyroid.
I have seen patients who have been helped with acupuncture for hyperthyroid. So that's the best I can tell you. I've also seen patients where it hasn't been helpful.
Hi. What has been the effect of the Internet on interest in alternative medicine? That's to everyone.
Well, I think the Internet has sort of gotten more people in this country and the world interested in medicine, healthcare. Patients come in now fully aware of almost everything you can imagine. In fact, many of us find ourselves at a disadvantage because the patient comes in with a particular complaint and they've researched all of it and they come in and they ask questions. So I think it's made regular medicine more popular, regular healthcare more popular, but it's also done the same thing for the alternative medicine. And I think because so many people were using alternative medicine to begin with, what the net does is sort of validate the fact that, you know, other people are using the stuff that they use, that friends talked about, and now on the internet there are hundreds of thousands of people using it, and it sort of validates the fact that it may work. Unfortunately, it's most without scientific foundation, unfortunately.
In addition, actually, to the Frontline website, on the National Institutes of Health website, there is a section of that devoted to complementary and alternative medicine. And actually, you can find all the clinical styles, all of the trials, basically, on that website.
I have a question for any of the panelists. I'm interested in your insight into why people turn away from conventional medicine. What is it that we're not satisfying?
I think the problem is conventional medicine can't cure everything. It can't make everything go. It can't make cancer necessarily go away. It can't make pain go away. It can't make diabetes go away. As I said, because the advances in Western medicine have been so dramatic, people are now living with chronic illness. And I think, I don't remember, it was like something like 98 million Americans live with pain, or some extraordinary number. And so I think people are frustrated. They also want to feel more in control. And I think by doing things, taking a pill or going to see a homeopathist or whatever makes them feel more in control.
Well, I think that some of it has to do with style and being listened to. And I think that usually that the conventional medical model doesn't have a lot to offer in that way. People don't feel like they're listened to. But also I think that conventional medicine does a pretty good job of controlling symptoms, but it doesn't do a very good job of getting rid of the disease. And some people are looking a little further. Good example is patients with migraines. And usually somebody would come to me either if they're successfully being treated but with a migraine medication, so it's controlling the migraines but they have side effects, or they've tried all the migraine medications and it's not helping. So I think people are trying to figure out, can they do something where they don't have to take medication for the rest of their lives and actually get rid of the underlying cause? So I think that's some of the frustration with conventional medicine.
And certainly the cancer patients that we follow in the film, both of them actually said that they were pretty tired of the chemotherapy and the radiation, so they turned to alternative approaches out of that.
Hi. This question primarily is for Dr. Barton. What is the science or the evidence behind your treatment choices? Why caffeine enemas? Why ground-up tarantulas?
Well, I've never recommended a caffeine or a coffee enema, so I can't tell you specifically. And it's really hard to answer point by point. I just want to say that there are quite a few things of natural treatments that have not been studied and have not been proven. So that doesn't mean that they don't work. It just means that they haven't been proven that they have worked. But probably people don't know that only about 15 or 20% of conventional treatments have been proven to, beyond a shadow of a doubt, in the same rigorous fashion to be effective. So if you're going to hold up natural therapies to a standard, then you should hold up conventional therapies to a standard too. And so the question really is, as a society, what are we going to do with unproven things? Are we going to not let people use things that have not been proven? And if that's the case, then also take out those 80% of the conventional therapies that have not been adequately proven. Or are we going to have a more permissive society that says let anybody do anything, or is it going to be somewhere in between? And that's really the question. It's really hard. It's hard to argue in even conventional medicine or natural medicine. It's really hard to argue a point with somebody that this has or has not been proven because there's studies one way or the other. And so it's going to take a while to figure all that out. And then you have to figure out for each item or each process, so that's going to be a difficult thing too.
Dr. Carter, can you just address those issues about the lack of clinical trials in Western medicine?
Well, I think that most of the products that we use currently that are prescription medications, and even most of the patent medicines, undergo some rigorous trials of some type. and these are ongoing issues the FDA does. I'm not familiar with 80%. Now, if you're talking about by therapies, if you mean things other than medications, then but I'm not familiar with 80% of the current pharmaceutical products having been shown to have no benefit. They have indications, and most of the time they show some benefit. They certainly don't show harmful effects. We know that, and I think that if more natural products, if more of the complementary medicine was tested, and even if it showed no benefit but showed no harmful effects, most of us in straight medicine would be willing to support people using them.
Thank you.
Yes. What do you think it will take for insurance companies to have broader coverage of alternative medicines, and why has not really been the case?
Evidence.
Dr. Delmar?
Evidence. Yeah, in fact, some of the insurers in Massachusetts are now covering some forms, or they're giving a discount to their members for some forms of alternative medicine, but I think they're looking for evidence. I mean, I would expect if, for instance, if another acupuncture study came out and showed that it indeed dramatically raised pregnancy rates, I suspect the insurers would start to look at it, because acupuncture is a lot cheaper than another IVF cycle.
And actually, Oxford is starting to offer some coverage of acupuncture in a few different states. So acupuncture is slowly starting to get covered by insurance companies.
The other thing, I think, is social pressure. Social pressure will make a big difference on whether it's covered or not.
That's true.
That will happen faster than actually gathering evidence for every different modality or herb or process.
Dr. Carter?
Well, I'm not sure that's going to happen. I mean, I think that health care costs are so high currently that insurers do the best they can not to cover things. And I think that social pressures being what they may, the way things get covered is that they're mandated. Mammograms are covered by everybody in the state because the state mandates it. And things get covered because they're mandated, not because the insurance company, out of their benevolence, decides that it's okay, we're going to cover, ground up scorpion tails. That's not how it works. Yeah. Or tarantulas, I'm sorry.
Tarantulas, scorpions, it's okay. Sir?
I'm a physiological psychologist, and 3 years ago I went through a midlife crisis and closed my lab and decided I'd try to investigate this world. And I spent the last 3 years doing that. And the take-home message of what I've learned is this is a very polarized world, and that we have extremists on both ends. Those in traditional medicine who look at anything in, quote, alternative as if it was homogeneous and reject it out of hand. And what I've learned is that the alternative world is very non-homogeneous. I've started exploring and spent time with people like Dr. Barton, and I've gone to Bastyr University and a number of different alternative facilities around the country. And one of the problems for a consumer is that of quality control. I mean, people that have an ND in a state where it's licensed have gone to a university where they've gone through a 4-year program and are licensed. And one of the problems that people like Dr. Barton have is that it's not licensed in this state. And as a consumer, you don't know what you're getting. So that's a concern. And then on the other end of the continuum, people in the quote alternative world, as if it was homogeneous, there are those who, as soon as they hear the word natural or alternative or holistic, they accept uncritically. I think most consumers want to try to make sense of it, and they want it, to be able to not reject out of hand all of Western medicine, but want to explore alternatives. And I think people are very frustrated in how to make sense of it and how to have the two worlds be able to speak to each other. And I don't know if that's a question or a statement, but I'll leave it at that. How does the average person who wants to complement what they're doing in their traditional medicine make sense of exploring alternative? Do they rely on the advice from the person at the herbal store? Do they talk to a friend?
I think they ought to talk to their primary care physician.
Yeah, exactly.
But the point you make is super, because if you look at, I would in no way equate the guy who was making music with the zithers on the lady's chest with this guy here, because I know naturopathic physicians and I know a lot of the things that they do, and I don't put down what he does because I know he believes in what he does, and a lot of things he does are good. Okay, but I think that there are too many people in the fringes of so-called holistic health that sort of take away standards, and we need standards. And in California, I know that MDs are licensed. Is that right?
Yeah, just got licensed.
I mean, it's a big deal. and they can order tests. And I remember the big deal that chiropractors went through years ago when the AMA stopped them from ordering X-rays in the hospital. It was a big deal. They finally got a chance to do that, and I think that maybe California will sort of signal what's going to happen in the rest of the country, as it often does.
So we're going to get an actor as our governor, too?
I think it's a good thing. In the film, we sort of look at the conversations that are starting to happen between doctors and their patients. And actually, people are more going to their primary care physicians and sort of talking about the supplements they're taking. And that way, we can kind of understand what's really happening with herbs and with pharmaceuticals, because that's a combination that can sometimes be dangerous.
I work in a big academic group, and I can tell you that every doc in that group can talk about alternative therapies. I'm not, as a super expert, but we are familiar with the therapies. We know about it because our patients come in talking about it, and the way you show your patient that you're up to speed on everything that's going on is you're able to have a conversation about these products. And when one of my patients comes in and talks about something that I'm not familiar with, I put it out front. I don't know what that is. Tell me about it. And that's what you have to do.
So let me put the shoe on the other foot. I have patients, actually my least favorite patients are patients who don't want to do any conventional medicine. They just want to use natural therapies for whatever it is, and that's hard for me. And so sometimes I'm sitting there, they're coming to a specialist in natural therapies, I'm saying, you need surgery, I can't help you. So I think the dogma of the professions really can get in the way of what needs to be done. The other thing I am also seeing that you're very open-minded, and you're seeing a social change not only in the society but also in the medical schools. And I don't know how many of you here are medical students, but as medical students are in their lives are using more natural therapies, and then they go to medical school, or they've grown up, their parents use natural therapies, and they go to medical school. It's not so strange to them. So I think you're seeing that the division, if there actually is a division, is much narrower than we think.
I heard two things in terms of the response to what is conventional medicine doing wrong. And one was that people aren't being listened to, and the second is that they want more control. And I wonder if anyone has thought about how our insurance works right now and what influence that has had on our broader society moving towards looking for other alternatives.
Dr. Delmar, are you try?
Thank you.
Well, up until relatively recent, insurance companies have really focused on procedures. And, it was a very medicalized model. Can I just sort of segue to what I was just thinking? I used to work with Herb Benson, and his model of medicine, or of healthcare, was a three-legged stool. And 1/3 was surgical, or interventions. 1/3 was pharmaceutical, and 1/3 was self-care. And so he said, alternative medicine isn't separate because acupuncture is an intervention, and herbs are a pharmaceutical. The third leg is what we haven't talked about tonight at all, and that's self-care. And it's ironic, Americans are pill poppers. We take pills for everything. Instead of exercising and dieting, we go on Lipitor. Instead of doing relaxation techniques, we pop Valium. And so a lot of the alternative medicine things that are offered are things that are done to patients to help them get better, rather than encouraging patients to practice, as you were saying, much healthier lifestyle behaviors that is going to make them healthier, happier, and less uncomfortable. And yet we don't talk about that at all.
That's a good point.
Can I answer that,
Sure.
that question? Well, you guys are spending $48 billion a year on natural therapy, so it hasn't totally put the brakes on it. But what it has done is limit the types of populations who can use natural therapies. So I think that's a disadvantage, and that's a disadvantage I see in my practice. Some of the lower income people who could benefit from natural therapies can't afford it.
That's true.
I was wondering, I know the tarantula therapy is kind of out there, but I'm curious as to where that came from. Somebody didn't just one day wake up and say, gee, I think I'll ground up a tarantula. That must have come from some traditional something, and I'm wondering if you guys can comment on maybe the coffee enemas or some of the things that are kind of out there, what their origins are, if they go back to Native American or Chinese, and then also if there's been maybe a correlation with Western medicine in discovering, oh yeah, the reason that works is because of some background that we know. When I was a kid, my mom used to give me honey and apple cider vinegar mixed together with hot water, and that was our, magic potion. And then it turned out our pediatrician much later said, oh yeah, that works because I don't know, something about the pH in your lymph nodes or something, but I can't remember, but I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
Why don't actually, do you want to talk specifically about homeopathy? Because
think, chamomile, whatever. You dilute it, and then you give that to a person who would exhibit certain symptoms of taking too much of that remedy. So if you had put nettles on your skin and makes you itchy, then you could think of taking homeopathic nettles to help you not be itchy. So that's basically the theory. How it works, nobody knows. Is it energetic medicine in a bottle? I have no clue. Is it immunological, or like a vaccine? We have no clue. How it was discovered was one person about 200 years ago realized that quinine helped to cure malaria, and that actually if you took too much quinine, it would cause those symptoms. So he noticed that this was the cure for something that it would cause. And so he was the person the light bulb went off before there were a light bulb, and said, well, I wonder if there are other things. And so he started experimenting with that, and that's how homeopathy developed. I think it'll take us a long time to figure out how it works. It may take us shorter time to find out if it works.
I mean, if I was that little 4-year-old boy, when I was receiving the tarantulas, did you see all the toys they had in the doctor's office? If I were that 4-year-old boy, I would behave whatever it took so I could go play with those toys. So,
well, except he was able to play with them.
That's true. He did sit down and play with them.
Okay. Ma'am,
hi. I'm in the field of neuropsychology, which is also interested in the brain and the mind and the body connections, and I've become increasingly interested in the physiological basis for the placebo effect. And there have been a couple of studies that have caught my attention, and one is that they were doing neuroimaging studies looking at the neuronal changes that occur following behavioral therapy, and they found that there were some very interesting findings, but also the people on the wait list exhibited brain changes. And secondly, we also read, this is in a graduate program, and we were reading some studies looking at neuroimaging of acupuncture patients, and they were doing acupuncture on the foot, and I don't know much about acupuncture, but they found the occipital cortex was becoming very activated, and apparently that's an area that's supposed to help with visual problems. And one of the criticisms of the study was, oh, these are very experienced acupuncture patients. They know what to expect. And my thought was, well, that's interesting that you have, even if it is the placebo effect, that you could potentially have the power to activate the brain region that you think should be active. So I guess my question is, I mean, it revolves around the fact that I think the placebo effect is immediately discounted in terms of the power of these different treatments. And the show, there's the big study that's going on looking at the sham treatment versus acupuncture. What happens when they find that the sham treatment is as equally as powerful as the acupuncture? What happens then to the medicinal community? Are we going to discount these treatments based on the fact that it is the placebo effect, or is that even more powerful towards the power of our minds to control our health?
There's a number of really progressive studies going on at Harvard in particular on the placebo effect, and I think it's a really interesting area. We actually go in a little more depth into the placebo effect a bit more in the film in another place, but we also have a discussion on our website about the placebo. Do you guys want to answer that? Is there anything in particular about it?
I wouldn't discount the placebo effect. I think that if people take something that makes them feel better, and many of these alternative therapies make people feel better, then that's a benefit. And if that therapy does not cause any particular harm, then that's on the plus side, and I'm all for that. I firmly believe that.
Well, it shows the power of the mind. I mean, most placebo studies show, a 30-something% impact of the placebo effect? That's astonishing.
There are a lot of new studies out there, but there are also contradictory studies, so.
Shocking.
Okay. Hi.
In follow-up to that question, and also following up with Dr. Domar's comment, I'm wondering, I think from the panel, and maybe specifically from Dr. Domar, what is it in our society right now that's both pushing people to these alternatives of popping pills, which is an awfully large component of the homeopathic nature, approach, and also what maybe prevents people or pushes people that is going on in society so that they're not pursuing these mind-body approaches, because my argument would be it's a lot easier to put a pill in your mouth in the morning, placebo effect or no, and not, for example, as opposed to Lipitor, which is not a placebo effect medication. I think there's lots of proven results that say it works, as opposed to the exercise, as opposed to a mind-body approach that can very clearly have the same effect. And I think there are studies that I understand are out there that very much prove that stress provides a very negative impact on things like cholesterol, that not getting exercise and other things. So I'm just interested in a little further information and then sort of perception, as well as any research that would show why we can't get the society to move towards mind-body approaches that are clearly an advantage over any medical approach, an advantage over any naturopathic approach.
Dr. Demar?
Oh, thanks.
That's hard. It's a big question.
Well, I think I would summarize it by saying that humans, especially Americans, are extremely resistant to change. And it's incredibly difficult to get someone to change their behavior. Easier if someone is highly motivated. So it's easier to get cancer patients and infertility patients to change because they're so highly motivated. But ironically, some of the hardest patients to get to change their behavior are chronic pain patients, who you would think would do anything to get rid of their pain. And I think one of the disadvantages of mind-body approaches is it takes time and effort and concentration. And Americans we're so stressed and we're so time pressured as it is. Are you going to take 20 minutes to meditate, or are you going to take your pill? And it's easy to take the pill.
We have 2 more questions. Time for only 2 questions. Okay, sir?
This is not my question directly, but I'm so interested in the marketing of these pills every night at dinner. I'm besieged with the purple pill by Nixium, which of course looks like Barney, right? So everybody's conditioned to love Barney, to love the purple pill. They want Nixium. But there were a group of doctors that came to the Dartmouth Medical School, and they observed that in Vermont, all of a sudden, a new doctor would come into the area, and there would be a whole lot of tonsils taken out. Or another doctor would move into another area, and there would be a lot of different kinds, prostates, kinds of removals or different things. And it became clear that whatever the expertise of the doctor or the consultant was, that's what they did more of. So, I mean, each practitioner has a specialty that he loves to do. So, I see, if you go to a certain kind of practitioner, you're going to get the solution that they feel most comfortable with, whether or not that may or may not be your diagnosis. Now, how prevalent is this within your communities, and how does this work in terms of each of you as consultants, diagnosing the thing you guys do best, and of course, I'm also very interested in Mr. Shiva's, Dr. Shiva's name, which of course in the Hindu doctor of destruction and rebirth, whether or not that has.
Why our practice is so small.
Well, you have to have destruction before you have rebirth.
Well, a lot of medicine is market forces, and in certain areas you have 3 cardiologists, and if another cardiologist came in, he or she wouldn't get any work. Certainly in areas where the concentration or density of doctors is not so great, a new doctor coming in with a particular specialty may end up doing a lot of what is needed in that area. I think that specialists get referrals from other doctors, and if there's a need to take a prostate out, presumably your primary care doctor would have referred you to a doctor to do that. I don't think the urologists hang out signs saying, "Come and get your prostates taken out." I think that the ideal is that they take them out because they need to come out. And the real place where you see the impact of the docs in the area is laboratory testing. A new doctor comes into a particular area, and all of a sudden there's a $300,000 or $400,000 increase in laboratory testing ordered by that doctor. The marketing is very subtle sometimes. You mentioned the blue pill. There are pills on the TV that they don't even tell you what they're for. I don't know if people have seen this Levitra, where the guy's throwing the football. I mean, patients come in and say, "What is this, a new antacid?" Well, it's the new Viagra. But nobody knows that because they don't know what Levitra is, and they never tell you what it is on that ad. you know, so you're in the zone, whatever that means. So I think that that it's all marketing, and I don't want to sort of go much further than that.
We have time for one more question.
We've been talking a lot about kind of validating therapies and that we don't know very much about. If each of you had one or two wishes for the future of research into these alternative and complementary therapies in terms of who would conduct the research, what kind of results you want to see, how many studies you want to see, which therapies would be tested, any of these things, what would your wishes be for the future of where this goes?
It's a good conclusionary question.
I'd say I'd like to see 2 randomized controlled studies, not sponsored by an entity that stands to benefit from it, but independently conducted. And you do one study and you have to replicate it. And then if you've proven that the intervention is indeed either effective or not effective, clinical practice should follow suit.
I'd love to see more therapy on vitamins, what's happening with vitamins. I know some things have been done with vitamin C and other things, but I'd like to see a major push to see what benefits are. We know that if you don't have X amount of vitamin C, you're deficient, but we have no idea what the top should be and how beneficial is it to take 3 or 4, and that's where this whole idea of megavitamin therapy comes from, except that people don't realize that sometimes that's harmful. So for me, working on vitamin therapy, which has got to be an NIH contract.
It is happening.
Well, we're so far behind in the research on natural therapies, I couldn't tell you where I'd want to start. But one of the things that we tend not to do very well is research systems, like a systematic approach, a naturopathic approach for treating migraines, rather than saying, how does feverfew work for migraines? Saying, okay, is a naturopathic approach or an acupuncture approach, what are the outcomes? So outcome studies, I think, would be more valuable than specific items.
So, Louis, you want to just conclude?
I just want to thank our guest and Rainey, I think, for a very interesting presentation. And I want to remind everybody that the program is on tomorrow night on Channel 2 at 9 o'clock. If you can't see the broadcast, it will be streaming on our website so that you can see the program whenever you wish. And our transcript of it will also be there, as well as additional reporting, as Rainey pointed out. But let's give a round of applause to our attendees. Thank you for coming.